Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku returned after being absent. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The rain in Muzutafu didn't wash things clean anymore. It just pushed the grime deeper into the cracks of the pavement, turning the city into a watercolor painting left out in a storm, smudged, gray, and weeping. Katsuki Bakugo crouched on the edge of a gargoyle jutting out from a pre-Quirk-era cathedral in District 4. The stone was slick with moss and water, but his boots, modified with grip soles developed by the support course, held him firm. The rain hammered against his mask, drumming a rhythm that used to annoy him. Now, it was just white noise. It drowned out the thoughts he didn't want to hear. He tapped the comms unit in his ear. Sector 4 Alpha is clear. Moving to the rendezvous point. Don't drag your feet, extras. Copy that, Dynamite. Uraraka's voice crackled through the static. She sounded exhausted. They all did. Uravity and Ingenium are sweeping the alleyways near the station. We'll meet you in 10. 10 is too slow, Bakugo grunted, pushing himself off the ledge. Make it 5. He launched himself into the air, a controlled burst of nitroglycerin propelling him across the gap between buildings. The explosion was muted by the heavy downpour, a dull thump rather than a sharp crack. It had been a year, 365 days. A full rotation of the Earth around the Sun. A year since the Paranormal Liberation War had ripped the foundation of their superhuman society apart. A year since the hospitals overflowed, since the heroes fell like flies, and since the symbol of peace became a memory of a golden age that felt centuries old. And it had been a year since Izuku Midoriya had left a note on his desk and vanished into the abyss. Bakugo landed on a rusted fire escape, the metal groaning under his weight. He ignored the protest of the steel and kept moving. He didn't like stopping. Stopping meant thinking. Thinking meant remembering the look on All Might's face when he realized his successor was gone. Thinking meant remembering the empty seat in the 2A classroom that Aizawa-sensei refused to let anyone fill. They were second years now. They were supposed to be enjoying sports festivals and internships. Instead, they were child soldiers in a cold war against an enemy that lurked in the shadows, led by a demon who wanted to consume the world. Bakugo, Todoroki's voice came through the line, calm but tight. I'm picking up a thermal spike in Sector 4 Beta. Near the old warehouse district. Is it a villain? Bakugo asked, veering left, banking off a brick wall to change his trajectory. I'm not sure. The heat signature is erratic. It's fluctuating wildly. It doesn't look like a standard fire quirk. I'm closer, Bakugo growled. I'll check it out. You and Icy Hot keep the perimeter. If it's a stray love thug, I'm going to turn them into paste. Wait for backup, Bakugo. Ida's voice cut in, sharp with authority. Protocol dictates. Protocol can eat dirt for eyes. If we wait, they run. I'm engaging. Bakugo cut the feed before Ida could lecture him further. He didn't care about protocol. He cared about results. Every villain he crushed was one step closer to finding the League. Every interrogation, every broken jaw, was a breadcrumb leading to Shigaraki. And if he found Shigaraki, maybe he would find the idiot who was hunting him. The warehouse district was a graveyard of industry. Rusted shipping containers were stacked like Jenga blocks, casting long, jagged shadows that the streetlights couldn't penetrate. The rain was heavier here, coming down in sheets that reduced visibility to near zero. Bakugo slowed his pace, landing silently on top of a container. He wiped the water from his visor. His palms were sparking, the sweat mixing with the rain, waiting for ignition. Below him, in the center of a muddy clearing, something was moving. It wasn't a human. It was too large, too hunched. It stood on 4 limbs, its skin a dark, bruised purple that seemed to absorb the dim light. Exposed muscle fibers twitched along its back, and a ring of eyes glowed a sickly yellow around a skull that looked like it had been cracked open and put back together wrong. A high-end. Bakugo's breath hitched. They hadn't seen a high-end Nomu in months. The heroes assumed the doctor's labs had been destroyed thoroughly enough to stop production. Apparently, they were wrong. This one was different, though. It was leaner, more skeletal. It didn't have the bulk of the hooded Nomu that Endeavor had fought, but it vibrated with a kinetic energy that made the air around it hum. TCH. Bakugo grinned, a feral expression that didn't reach his eyes. Jackpot. He didn't wait. He didn't assess. He raised his right gauntlet, pulled the pin, and let the stored power loose. Boom! The explosion lit up the night, a miniature sun born in the rain. The shockwave rattled the containers, sending cascades of water flying. Bakugo rode the recoil, flipping in the air and landing in a crouch 10 meters away from the blast zone. Steam hissed as the rain evaporated instantly. Too easy, Bakugo muttered, though his instincts were screaming at him to move. From the smoke, a shadow lunged. It was fast. Faster than anything Bakugo had fought in the last year. He barely had time to raise his left arm to block before a clawed hand, hard as diamond, slammed into his gauntlet. The force of the impact sent him skidding backward through the mud. His boots tore gouges in the earth as he fought to regain his balance. The gnome shrieked, a sound like grinding metal and a human scream spliced together. It emerged from the smoke unharmed. The explosion hadn't even scorched its skin. It had absorbed the impact. Shock absorption? Bakugo grit his teeth. Generic trash. Bakugo! I surged past him, a massive glacier tearing through the mud, aiming to entrap the beast. Shoto Todoroki slid into view on a trail of ice, his left side engulfed in flames to regulate his temperature against the cold rain. The gnome didn't dodge. It simply vibrated. Its body blurred, and the eyes shattered upon contact, turning into harmless snow. Resonance, Todoroki noted, his eyes narrowing. It destroys solid matter with vibration. Don't give me a commentary, just kill it! Bakugo yelled. He launched himself forward again, using small explosions to strafe around the creature. AP shot! He focused his blast into a concentrated beam, aiming for the creature's exposed brain. The beam pierced the air, but the gnome twisted its neck at an unnatural angle, the shot grazing its shoulder. It lashed out with a tail Bakugo hadn't noticed before, a long, whip-like appendage tipped with a bone spike. Bakugo dodged, but the spike grazed his ribs, tearing through his hero costume. He hissed in pain, landing heavily. Engine boost, recipro turbo. Tenya Ito was a blur of silver and blue, slamming into the gnome's flank with a kick that could derail a train. The beast stumbled, finally knocked off balance. Uraraka, now! Ida shouted. Ochako Uraraka dropped from the sky, having floated herself above the battlefield. She touched the gnome's back, her fingers pressing against the wet skin. Release! The gnome began to float, losing its purchase on the ground. Got you, she breathed, but her eyes widened in horror a second later. The gnome didn't need the ground. Jets of compressed air erupted from its elbows, stabilizing it in midair. It spun, its tail whipping out and catching Uraraka across the stomach. She gasped, the air leaving her lungs, and was flung into a stack of shipping containers. The metal crumpled around her with a sickening crunch. Round face! Bakugo screamed. The cohesion broke. The carefully practiced formation of Class 2As shattered under the weight of panic. Ida rushed to Uraraka, leaving his back exposed. Todoroki unleashed a wall of fire to cover them, but the rain dampened the flames, and the gnome's vibration dispersed the heat before it could do damage. The creature landed, its yellow eyes locking onto Bakugo. It smiled, a jagged, skin-splitting tear of a mouth. Hero. It rasped. It could speak. That was never good. Die. It moved so fast it vanished. Bakugo reacted on pure instinct, blasting himself backward, but the gnome was already there. A massive hand wrapped around his throat, lifting him off the ground. The grip was crushing. He choked, clawing at the fingers, sparking explosions against the purple skin, but it was like hitting a tank with a firecracker. The gnome raised its other hand, forming the fingers into a spear point. Bakugo stared at it. The rain was freezing. His vision swam. Is this it? He thought, a strange calmness washing over him. Dying in the mud in a district nobody cares about. He thought of the notebook. The charred, waterlogged notebook he had found in Deku's room after he left. The analysis. The frantic scribbles of a boy trying to save everyone. Damn you, Deku, Bakugo thought, his vision darkening. You're gonna be the only one left, aren't you? Get away from him! Todoroki screamed, unleashing a desperate wave of ice, but the gnome simply vibrated it away without looking. The spear hand lunged forward, aiming for Bakugo's chest. Bakugo squeezed his eyes shut. Crack boom. It wasn't an explosion. It was the sound of the sound barrier breaking. The air pressure in the clearing dropped instantly, sucking the breath out of everyone's lungs. A shockwave of pure force flattened the rain, creating a perfect, dry sphere in the middle of the downpour for a split second. The grip on Bakugo's throat vanished. He fell, hitting the mud hard, gasping for air. He coughed, retching, his hands clutching his bruised neck. He looked up, his vision blurry. The Noma was gone. No, not gone. It was 50 feet away, embedded deep into the side of a reinforced concrete warehouse. The wall had cratered inward, a spider web of cracks spreading up to the roof. Standing between Bakugo and the beast was a ghost. The figure was shrouded in a swirling vortex of teal and green lightning, arcs of energy so intense they hissed as they vaporized the rain before it could touch him. He was crouched low, one hand touching the ground, the other clenched in a fist that smoked with heat. He wore rags. That was the first thing Bakugo noticed. Tattered, filthy rags that hung off a frame that looked too thin. A yellow cape, stained with oil and blood, was torn halfway up the back. Dark, metallic gauntlets covered his arms, battered and scratched. But it was the aura that froze the blood in Bakugo's veins. It wasn't the warm, hopeful power of All Might. It was heavy. Suffocating. It felt like rage distilled into a physical form. 6 tendrils of black energy, black whip, writhed from the figure's back, moving independently like angry vipers, snapping at the air. Who? Ida whispered, supporting a limping Uraraka. The Noma pulled itself from the wall, screeching in fury. Its regeneration was already knitting its caved-in chest back together. It roared, the sound shaking the ground. The figure didn't flinch. He slowly stood up. The lightning intensified, changing color. It shifted from green to a violent, throbbing red, then back to green. Steam poured off the figure's body. Target identified, the figure muttered. The voice was distorted, robotic, coming through a metallic respirator mask. But the cadence was familiar. Regeneration type. Vibration quirk. Air jets. The Noma charged. The figure vanished. It wasn't speed like Ida's. It was instantaneous. One moment he was there, the next, he was in the air above the Noma. Smokescreen, the figure said. A cloud of purple smoke exploded from the gauntlets, enveloping the beast. The Noma flailed, blinded. Float. F.A. Gene. 45%. The figure dropped from the sky like a meteor. He spun, his leg whipping around in a perfect arc. The iron sole of his boot connected with the Noma's head. The sound was wet. The Noma's head didn't just break. It was driven downward with such force that the creature's body folded. The ground erupted. A crater 10 meters wide formed in an instant, the asphalt shattering like glass. The Noma bounced, its body limp, but the figure wasn't done. Black whip shot out, wrapping around the creature's limbs, arresting its momentum. The figure yanked, pulling the massive beast back toward him. Manchester. The figure cocked his arm back. The air distorted around his fist. The green lightning screamed. Smash! He drove his fist into the Noma's exposed chest. The impact cleared the sky. The clouds above them parted in a perfect circle, revealing the moon for a fleeting second. The shockwave blew the windows out of every building in a 3-block radius. Bakugo had to dig his fingers into the mud to keep from being blown away. The Noma was obliterated. There was no other word for it. The torso was simply gone, reduced to mist and chunks of biological matter that rained down around them. The legs and head fell to the ground, twitching once, then stilling. Silence returned to Sector 4. The rain began to fall again, filling the silence with a soft hiss. The figure stood in the center of the crater, breathing heavily. The green lightning flickered and died. The black whip tendrils receded slowly, retreating into his back as if reluctant to stop fighting. Bakugo stared. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The figure swayed. He took a step forward, then stumbled. He caught himself, his hand trembling. Bakugo forced himself to his feet. His legs felt like jelly. He walked toward the edge of the crater. Todoroki and Ida were behind him, frozen in shock. Hey! Bakugo shouted. His voice was raspy. Identify yourself. The figure didn't answer. He stood with his back to them, his head hung low. The yellow cape fluttered in the wind. Bakugo slid down the slope of the crater, ignoring the heat radiating from the ground. He marched up to the figure. He should be cautious. He should wait for Aizawa. But he couldn't. He reached out and grabbed the figure's shoulder. I said, "Who the hell are why?" The figure spun around, defensive instincts kicking in. He slapped Bakugo's hand away with shocking speed, raising a fist to strike. But he stopped. The iron mask stared at Bakugo. The eyes of the suit glowed with a faint, dying emerald light. The fist lowered. The figure's body seemed to lose all its tension at once. "Ka-chan?" The voice was a whisper. Broken. Dry. But undeniable. Bakugo froze. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The figure's knees buckled. He collapsed forward. Bakugo caught him, instinctively, his arms wrapping around the tattered body. He was light. Too light. Under the rags and the armored plating, Bakugo could feel ribs. He smelled of old blood, ozone, and sweat. He smelled like a battlefield. Bakugo lowered him to the ground, the mud seeping into the yellow cape. He looked at the mask. It was a terrifying thing, a perversion of a smile, jagged and metallic. "Bakugo?" Todoroki called out from the rim of the crater. "Who is it?" Bakugo didn't answer. His hands were shaking. He reached for the clasps of the mask. His fingers fumbled with the mechanism, slick with rain. Click! The mask hissed as the seal broke. Bakugo pulled it away. A flash of lightning illuminated the face beneath. It was a face Bakugo had known his entire life, but it was a stranger's face now. Izuku Midoriya looked 10 years older. His skin was pale and gray, drawn tight over his cheekbones. There were dark circles under his eyes so deep they looked like bruises. A jagged scar ran from his hairline down to his jaw, cutting through his left eyebrow. His hair, usually an unruly mop, was matted with grime and blood, but it was the eyes that scared Bakugo the most. Deku's eyes were open, staring up at the rain, but they were glazed. Empty. The spark, that annoying, incessant spark that Bakugo had spent years trying to extinguish, was gone. "Deku?" Bakugo whispered. The name felt like glass in his throat. Midoriya blinked slowly, as if the action cost him immense effort. His eyes drifted to Bakugo's face. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just stared, assessing, as if checking to see if Bakugo was real or another hallucination. "Safe," Midoriya mumbled. His voice was a wreck. "Are you safe?" "Shut up," Bakugo choked out. He felt a burning in his eyes that had nothing to do with the rain. "Shut up, you damn nerd." "We're fine." Midoriya nodded, a tiny, jerky motion. "Good." "Tired?" "I'm tired." His eyes rolled back into his head. His body went limp in Bakugo's arms. "Midoriya!" Ida's voice was close now. "Midoriya! Get the medic!" Bakugo roared, looking back at them. His face was twisted in a snarl of pure panic. "Don't just stand there. Get recovery girl. Now!" Uraraka slid down the crater, ignoring her own injuries. When she saw him, she clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. She fell to her knees beside them, reaching out to touch Deku's face, but stopped, afraid she might break him. "Is he?" she sobbed. "He's alive," Bakugo said, pressing 2 fingers to Deku's neck. The pulse was there, rapid, thready, like a hummingbird's heart. But barely. Suddenly, black tendrils shot out from Deku's unconscious body. "Watch out!" Todoroki shouted. The black whip lashed out violently, forming a protective dome over Deku and Bakugo. It wasn't an attack. It was a reflex. Even in sleep, even unconscious, the quirk was reacting to perceived threats. It was a defensive shell, hard as steel, locking them inside. Bakugo stared at the black energy swirling inches from his face. It pulsed with a menacing red aura. "Stop it," Bakugo hissed at the unconscious boy. "It's me. It's safe." "Stop it, Deku." The whip didn't recede. It tightened. "He can't control it," Todoroki said from outside the dome. "His mind is still fighting." Bakugo looked down at the broken boy in his arms. He looked at the scars, the emaciated frame, the gray hair mixed in with the green from stress. He remembered the last time he saw Deku. He had looked determined. Hopeful, even. Now, he looked like a soldier who had walked through hell and left his soul behind. Where have you been? Bakugo whispered, gripping Deku's tattered suit. What did you do to yourself? The rain pounded against the black whip dome, unable to touch them. Inside the dark cocoon, held by his childhood friend, the ghost of Yue slept for the first time in a year. But as Bakugo watched the danger sense twitch under Deku's skin, he realized with a sinking dread, Deku might be back. But Izuku Midoriya was gone, and he wasn't sure if they could ever bring him back. 1 hour later, Yue High School. The transport flew low over the city, the rotors chopping the heavy air. Inside the medical bay of the VDOL, the atmosphere was suffocating. Midoriya lay strapped to a gurney, sedated with the strongest suppressants the paramedics had. Even so, he twitched constantly. Every few minutes, a spark of green lightning would arch across his skin, or a tendril of black whip would manifest and dissipate. Bakugo sat on the bench opposite him, refusing to leave. He hadn't washed the mud off his face. He hadn't treated the burns on his hands. He just watched. Aizawa was there, his face paler than usual. He looked at his student, his missing problem child, with a mixture of relief and profound sorrow. He's severely malnourished, the paramedic reported, checking the monitors. Dehydration, multiple improperly healed fractures in the arms and legs. I'm seeing scarring on his internal organs consistent with extreme quirk exhaustion. And what? Aizawa asked, his voice low. His cortisol levels, the paramedic said, shaking his head in disbelief. They're off the charts. Physiologically speaking, this boy has been in a fight or flight state for months. His body is eating itself to keep going. Bakugo clenched his fists until his knuckles popped. Fight or flight for months. He imagined Deku, alone in the dark, fighting Nomus, fighting mercenaries, fighting all for one's assassins. No bed. No food. No friends. Just the constant, blaring alarm of danger sense in his head, telling him to run, to hit, to survive. Why didn't you call? Bakugo thought furiously. Why didn't you ask for help? But he knew the answer. He knew it because he had read the note. To keep you safe. Idiot, Bakugo whispered. The VTOL began its descent toward Yue. The barrier system deactivated to let them through. As they landed on the tarmac, Bakugo looked out the window. The lights of the Heights Alliance dorms were on. He could see silhouettes in the windows. The class knew. News traveled fast. The doors opened. All Might was standing there in the rain. The skeletal former hero looked even frilier than usual. He was soaked to the bone, holding his hat in his hands. When he saw the gurney come out, he took a step forward then stopped. He saw the state of his successor. He saw the rags. He saw the scars. All Might made a sound, a choked, wounded noise that Bakugo never wanted to hear again. He rushed forward, his hands hovering over Deku, terrified to touch him. Young Midoriya. All Might wept, the rain mixing with his tears. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Bakugo walked past him. He couldn't handle All Might's pity right now. He couldn't handle the grief. He needed to be angry. Anger was fuel. Anger kept him moving. He walked toward the dorms, leaving the teachers to handle the medical transfer. He needed to tell the class. He needed to tell them that the prodigal son had returned. But as he walked away, he looked back one last time. The paramedics were struggling. Deku's eyes had snapped open again, glazed and unseeing. He was thrashing against the restraints, his mouth moving in a silent scream. Aizawa had to activate erasure, his red eyes glowing in the dark, just to get him to stop fighting the people trying to save him. Bakugo turned around and kept walking. The war hadn't ended just because Deku came back. It had just moved inside the gates. The lights inside Yue High School were usually warm, a soft, inviting yellow that promised safety, education, and a future. Tonight, however, the lights in the central corridor leading to the medical wing were a stark, sterile white. They hummed with an electric tension that vibrated in the teeth of everyone standing in the hallway. It was 2 a.m. The storm outside had not let up. It battered the reinforced glass of the windows, demanding entry, mirroring the chaos that had just been wheeled through the double doors. Inside the waiting area, the silence was heavy, broken only by the muffled sobs of Mina Ashido and the rhythmic tapping of Tenya Ida's foot against the linoleum. Class 2A was gathered. They were still in a mix of pajamas and half-donned hero gear. They had been woken up by the alarms, by the arrival of the transport, and by the terrifying rumor that had spread through the dorms like wildfire. Midoriya is back. But no one was celebrating. Katsuki Bakugo leaned against the far wall, arms crossed over his chest. He had refused to change out of his mud-caked hero costume. Dark streaks of grime stained his face, but he didn't wipe them away. His red eyes were fixed on the do not enter sign of the operating theater. He hadn't spoken a word since they landed. He looked. Ochako Uraraka sat on one of the plastic chairs, her head in her hands. She was trembling. She had seen him close up in the crater. She had touched the cold, hard plating of his armor and the feverish skin beneath. He didn't look like him. It's been a year, Ribbit, Tsuyu Ajui whispered, sitting next to her, placing a hand on Uraraka's back. People change. That wasn't change, Shoto Todoroki said. He was standing by the window, staring at his reflection. That was erosion. The doors to the medical wing hissed open. Every head snapped up. It wasn't a doctor. It was Shota Aizawa. Their homeroom teacher looked like he had aged a decade in the last hour. His capture scarf hung loosely around his neck, and his hair was messy, but his eyes were sharp, bloodshot, and grim. He held a clipboard in one hand, his knuckles white as he gripped it. Sensei? Momo Jiayu rose a step forward, her voice trembling slightly. How is he? Is he stable? Aizawa looked at his students. He saw the fear in their eyes. He saw the hope. He had to crush the hope, just a little, to make room for the reality. He is alive, Aizawa said, his voice raspy. That is the best I can give you right now. Can we see him? Kirishima asked, taking a step forward. If he knows we're here. No, Aizawa cut him off sharply. He is currently under heavy sedation. Recovery Girl is performing emergency surgery to stabilize multiple internal hemorrhages. Even if he were awake, he is in no state to see anyone. What kind of injuries? Ida asked, his voice professional but cracking at the edges. We saw the battle damage, but, Aizawa sighed, running a hand down his face. It's not just battle damage, Ida. It's accumulation. Malnutrition. Exhaustion. Dozens of fractures that healed improperly because he didn't set them. Infection in open wounds. He paused, looking at Bakugo. He has pushed one for all beyond the theoretical limits of his body for months without rest. His bones are like chalk. His muscle fibers are torn to ribbons. A stifled sob came from Hagakure. Go back to the dorms, Aizawa ordered, though his tone was softer than usual. There is nothing you can do here tonight. We have him. He is safe. Go. I'm not going, Bakugo growled. Aizawa looked at him. Bakugo, I said I'm not going. Bakugo's voice rose, cracking with a fury that masked a terrified panic. He pushed off the wall. I found him. I brought him in. I'm not leaving him alone with you people who lost him in the first place. The accusation hung in the air like poison. Aizawa didn't flinch. He knew Bakugo was lashing out. He knew because he felt the same self-loathing. You can stay in the waiting room, Aizawa conceded quietly. But you do not cross those doors until I say so. Is that clear? Bakugo gritted his teeth, then slumped back against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor. Fine. One by one, the class hesitated. They didn't want to leave, but they knew they were in the way. Come on, Ida said softly, guiding Uraraka up. We need to be rested. When he wakes up, he'll need us. Slowly, the hallway emptied, leaving only Bakugo sitting on the floor, and Todoroki, who silently took a seat across from him, refusing to leave his post. Inside the operating theater, the air smelled of ozone, antiseptic, and copper. Recovery Girl, Chio Shizenji, had been the school nurse for 40 years. She had treated All Might during his prime. She had seen devastating injuries from villain attacks, natural disasters, and training accidents. She thought she was unshakable. She was wrong. She stood on a stool next to the operating table, her hands hovering over the ruined body of Izuku Midoriya. Monitors beeped frantically around her, a chaotic symphony of life support. Heart rate is erratic, a nurse called out. BP is 80/50. He's crashing again. Push 2 milligrams of epinephrine, Chio barked. And get more plasma. He has no blood left in him. She leaned in, her lips pressed into a thin line. She placed a kiss on his forehead, activating her quirk. Heal. Usually, a green glow would envelope the patient, and the wounds would knit together. This time, the glow flickered and died. Too weak, she whispered, horror dawning on her. His stamina is at 0. If I use my quirk too much, the energy drain will kill him. She had to do this the hard way. Scalpel, she ordered. She worked on his left arm first. It was a road map of agony. The scars from his first year at Yuri were there, the twisted flesh from the muscular fight, but they were buried under new horrors. A jagged laceration ran from his elbow to his wrist, infected and angry. 2 fingers on his left hand had been broken and fused crookedly. We'll have to re-break the fingers, she murmured to the surgeon assisting her. Later. Just stop the bleeding for now. They cut away the remains of his suit. The fabric had fused to his skin in places, burnt by the high-voltage discharge of his own quirk. As they peeled back the chest plate, Chio gasped. His ribs were a mess of bruising. He was so thin that she could see the fluttering of his heart against his chest wall. There was 0 body fat. He had been running on pure adrenaline and quirk energy. How is he alive? The surgeon whispered, suctioning blood from a chest wound. Medically speaking, he should have died months ago. He didn't die because he refused to, a deep, hollow voice said from the doorway. Chio looked up. All Might stood there. Toshinori Yagi looked like a ghost haunting his own life. He had removed his jacket. His skeletal hands were gripping the doorframes so hard the metal was warping. His blue eyes, usually pools of shadows, were wide with a devastating mixture of love and horror. Toshinori, get out, Chio snapped, though her voice lacked its usual bite. This is a sterile field. I can't, Toshinori rasped. He walked forward, his legs trembling. He stopped at the foot of the bed. He looked at the boy he had chosen. The boy he had given a burden too heavy for any atlas to carry. Look at him, Chio, Toshinori wept, tears streaming down his gaunt face. I did this. I told him. You can become a hero. Is this what a hero looks like? Stop it, Chio ordered, stitching a deep gash on Izuku's thigh. Self-pity won't save him. If you want to help, hold his legs. He keeps thrashing. Toshinori moved. He placed his large, bony hands on Izuku's shins. The boy's skin was burning up. I'm here, my boy, Toshinori whispered, his voice breaking. I'm here. You can rest now. Please, just rest. As if hearing the voice of his mentor, Izuku's thrashing slowed. But the tension in his body didn't leave. His muscles remained coiled, hard as rock. Even in anesthesia, he was waiting for the next attack. Danger sense, Toshinori realized, watching the way Izuku's head twitched to the left even while unconscious. The 4th quirk, it's always active. It's tormenting him. We need to sedate him deeper, Chio said, wiping sweat from her brow. If his brain doesn't shut down, his heart will give out. Do it, Toshinori said, gripping Izuku's legs tighter. Whatever it takes. The mindscape, void, cold, dark, run. Izuku was running. He didn't know where he was running to, only what he was running from. The ground beneath him was sludge, a thick, tar-like substance that grabbed at his boots. The sky was a swirling vortex of purple and black. He's coming. The voice wasn't his. It was the first user. Or maybe the 4th. It was hard to tell them apart lately. The voices blended into a constant cacophony of warnings. Left. Dodge left. Izuku threw himself to the left. A spike of air pressure decimated the spot where he had just been standing. He scrambled up, his breath rattling in his chest like loose change. He was tired. He was so tired he wanted to lie down in the sludge and let it take him. No rest, the second user's voice barked. It was harsh, military. Rest is death. Move, 9th. Move. Izuku forced his legs to move. His one-for-all cowl was flickering. The rainbow of lights inside him, the power of 8 generations, felt heavy, like lead in his veins. Why won't it stop? Izuku screamed into the void. I left UA. I left my mom. I left everyone. Why are you still hunting them? From the darkness, a face emerged. It was Shigaraki, but not Shigaraki. It was all for one, wearing Shigaraki's skin like a suit. The mouth smiled, stretching too wide. Because you are the vessel, little brother, the voice boomed. Wherever you go, destruction follows. You are a plague. Izuku fired a Delaware smash at the face, but his fingers shattered. The air blast did nothing. The darkness surged forward. Hands, hundreds of cold, dead hands, reached out of the sludge. They grabbed his ankles. They grabbed his wrists. Danger! 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 The alarm in his head was a siren, screaming so loud it drowned out his own thoughts. He felt the hands pulling him down. Protect the core, the fifth user shouted. Don't let them take it. I won't! Izuku yelled. He summoned Black Whip. The tendrils exploded from his back, lashing out, cutting through the hands, but there were too many. One hand grabbed his face. It smelled of antiseptic. Capture, Izuku thought. They have me. The doctor has me. No! Recovery room 36 hours later. The room was silent. The storm had passed, leaving behind a gray, overcast morning. Izuku Midoriya lay in a specialized isolation bed. He was hooked up to 4 different 4-lines. His chest was wrapped heavily in bandages. His arms were in casts. A breathing tube had been removed an hour ago, replaced by an oxygen mask. Recovery girl sat in a chair in the corner, asleep. She had worked for 20 hours straight. Toshinori sat by the bed, reading a book he wasn't actually reading. He was just watching Izuku's chest rise and fall. Aizawa stood by the door, arms crossed, watching the monitors. His brain activity is increasing, Aizawa said softly. He's waking up. Toshinori stiffened. Is it too soon? Chio said. The sedatives wore off faster than expected, Aizawa said, his eyes narrowing. His metabolism is burning through them. Be ready, All Might. We don't know who is going to wake up in that bed. On the bed, Izuku's fingers twitched. The heart rate monitor began to beep faster. Beep, 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 beep. Izuku's eyes snapped open. They were wide, dilated, and terrified. For a second, he stared at the ceiling. The white tiles. The fluorescent light. Hospital? No. Lab, no, ma lab. His breath hitched. He tried to move, but his limbs were heavy. Restraints. Soft leather straps held his wrists and ankles to the bed rails. Captured. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded his system. The danger sense didn't ping. There was no immediate malicious intent, but his PTSD didn't care about quirks. It only knew the context. Tied down, pain, strangers. Midoriya? Toshinori leaned forward, keeping his voice soft. It's me. It's All Might. You're safe. Izuku's head snapped toward the sound. He saw the skeletal figure. Illusion, his mind screamed. Shigaraki plays tricks. Toga can shift. Don't trust it. Where is he? Izuku rasped. His voice was like sandpaper. He yanked at the restraints. The bed rattled. Who? Toshinori asked gently. AFO? He's not here. You're at UA. Liar! Izuku shouted, the word tearing his throat. Green lightning sparked around his body. The machines went haywire. The heart monitor turned into a solid tone. Young Midoriya, calm down. Toshinori stood up, hands raised. Get away! Crack! With a surge of strength that shouldn't have been possible for a boy in his condition, Izuku ripped his right hand free of the leather restraint. He didn't care that he had just rebroken his wrist. He swung his arm. A tendril of Black Whip shot out, knocking over the floor stand. Glass shattered. Fluids pooled on the floor. Recovery girl woke with a start. What is? Izuku scrambled backward, pressing his back against the headboard, knees pulled to his chest. He ripped the IVs out of his arm, blood spurting onto the sheets. He held his hand up, Black Whip writhing around him like a cage of snakes. His eyes were wild, darting around the room, checking the corners, the vents, the windows. I won't give it to you, Izuku hissed. He looked like a cornered animal. I'll die first. I'll destroy the quirk before I let you take it. Midoriya! Aizawa stepped forward, his hair floating up. His eyes glowed red. Erasure. The black whip vanished. The green lightning died. Izuku gasped as the power cut out. He looked at Aizawa. Eraser. Izuku whispered. He blinked, tears forming in his eyes. You have his quirk too? Did you take it from him? Did you kill Sensei? Aizawa's heart broke. The boy thought Aizawa was dead, and that this villain had stolen his quirk. I am your sensei, Aizawa said, keeping his voice steady, though he was trembling internally. He kept his eyes locked on Izuku, maintaining the erasure. I am Shota Aizawa. You are in the Yue infirmary. Look at me, Midoriya. Look at the scar under my eye. Look at the way I stand. Izuku panted, his chest heaving. He stared at Aizawa. He looked at All Might. All Might? I'm here. Toshinori wept openly now. I'm right here. Izuku lowered his hand. He looked at the restraints still on his legs. He looked at the blood on the floor. Yue? He whispered. Yes, Aizawa said. Bakugo brought you in. You fought a high-end in District 4. You collapsed. You've been asleep for 2 days. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut. He brought his hands to his head, gripping his hair. No, he moaned. No. I can't be here. Izuku, please. Toshinori stepped closer. You don't understand. Izuku screamed, his eyes flying open. They were manic. He can find me. He can track me. If I'm here, he's coming here. Everyone is going to die because I'm here. He tried to lunge off the bed, fighting Aizawa's quirk with pure physical desperation. I have to leave. Let me go. I have to draw him away. Midoriya, stop. Aizawa shouted, stepping in to physically restrain him. Let me go. Izuku fought them. He was weak, but he fought with the ferocity of someone who believed they were a walking bomb. He kicked, he scratched. You're all going to die. Why won't you let me save you? Because you need saving too. All Might yelled. The words hung in the air. Izuku froze. He looked at All Might. The adrenaline seemed to drain out of him all at once. He collapsed back onto the mattress, shaking violently. I'm not. Izuku choked out a sob. I'm not a person anymore, All Might. I'm just the holder. That's all I am. You have to let the holder leave. Recovery girl moved in quickly, a syringe in her hand. Shota, hold him steady. No. Don't. Izuku pleaded weakly as he felt the needle prick his arm. Don't make me sleep. Danger sense, it's buzzing. I have to be ready. Sleep, problem child, Aizawa whispered, brushing the sweaty hair out of the boy's eyes. We'll keep watch. The sedative took hold instantly. Izuku's eyes fluttered. The tension left his body, leaving him looking small and broken in the center of the white bed. Aizawa deactivated his quirk. He leaned against the wall, exhaling a breath he felt he had been holding for a year. Toshinori sank into the chair, burying his face in his hands. He thinks he's a weapon, Toshinori whispered. He thinks his life has no value outside of the quirk. We knew that, Aizawa said, staring at the sleeping boy. But seeing it, hearing him say it, the door to the room opened a crack. Aizawa spun around. I said no visitors. It was Bakugo. He stood in the doorway. He had clearly heard the screaming. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were fixed on Deku. Is he down? Bakugo asked quietly. He's sedated, Aizawa said. Bakugo walked into the room, ignoring Aizawa's glare. He stopped at the foot of the bed. He looked at the blood on the floor where Deku had ripped out the IVs. He looked at the restraints. He tried to run, Bakugo stated. It wasn't a question. He thinks he's endangering us, All Might said. Bakugo gripped the rail of the bed. His hands began to smoke slightly, a sign of his agitation. He is endangering us, Bakugo said. All Might looked up, shocked. Young Bakugo. But Bakugo continued, his voice dropping to a growl. That's the point of a hero school, isn't it? We sign up for the danger. He looked at Deku's sleeping face. He kept a notebook, Bakugo said suddenly. I found it in his bag when we brought him in. Aizawa raised an eyebrow. Analysis? No, Bakugo said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a battered, water-stained notebook. It was burnt at the edges. He tossed it onto the bedside table. Read the last entry, Bakugo said, turning to leave. And then tell me he's okay. Bakugo walked out, the door clicking shut behind him. Aizawa walked over to the table. He picked up the notebook. It was heavy with mud and water damage. He opened it to the last marked page. The handwriting was jagged, frantic, nothing like Midoriya's usual neat script. Entry 342. The fourth quirk is giving me headaches. I can't sleep. If I sleep, Shigaraki might find me. If he takes one for all, the world ends. Contingency plan. If I feel my mind slipping, if I feel him taking control. I have calculated the necessary force required to destroy the core from the inside. 100% smash to the temple. Or find a villain with a decay-type quirk. I cannot let him have it. My life is the lock. Death is the key. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, All Might. Aizawa closed the book. His hands were shaking. He looked at All Might. The former symbol of peace was staring at him, waiting. Aizawa didn't speak. He just placed the book down and looked at the boy in the bed. Izuku Midoriya hadn't just been fighting villains. He had been fighting the urge to execute himself for the greater good every single day. He's not leaving this room, Aizawa said, his voice cold steel. We are putting him on suicide watch. Effective immediately. All Might nodded, tears silent on his face. Outside, the sun finally broke through the clouds, casting a beam of light onto the linoleum floor. But the light didn't reach the bed. The shadows around Izuku Midoriya were too deep, and outside the door, leaning against the wall, Katsuki Bakugo slid down to the floor, pulled his knees to his chest, and for the first time since Kamino Ward, he cried. The room was white. Not the soft, eggshell white of the dorm walls that Uraraka had once tried to decorate with star stickers, nor the crisp, clean white of a fresh notebook page waiting to be filled with analysis. It was a clinical, aggressive white. The kind of white that burned the retina and offered nowhere for the eye to rest, nowhere for a shadow to hide. Izuku Midoriya sat on the edge of the bed. He did not slouch. He did not curl into himself as he might have done a year ago. He sat with his spine perfectly straight, his feet flat on the cold linoleum, his hands resting on his knees. His eyes, rimmed with the dark, bruised exhaustion of 1,000 sleepless nights, were fixed on the ventilation grate in the upper corner of the room. He was counting the seconds between the rotations of the fan blades. 1, 2, 3. Click. 1, 2, 3. Click. If the rhythm changed, it meant the airflow was being manipulated. If the airflow was manipulated, it could mean an airborne toxin. Or it could mean sound dampening was being activated. Or it could mean he was coming through the vents, liquefying his body to bypass the security measures. Izuku's right hand twitched. The impulse to summon Black Whip was a physical itch under his skin, a reflex honed by months of sleeping in drainage pipes and the burned-out husks of skyscrapers. But he held it back. He looked at his wrists. They were not bound by leather anymore. Now he wore thick, metallic bracelets, quirk suppressors. They hummed with a low frequency that made his teeth ache. They didn't completely nullify one for all. Nothing truly could, the stockpile was too vast. But they created a static interference that made summoning the power feel like wading through molasses. He was contained, asset secured, his mind supplied. The voice in his head sounded like the second user. Cold. Military. Location, UA High School. Security level, maximum. Status, compromised. The door hissed. A hydraulic seal breaking. Izuku didn't jump. He didn't gasp. He simply shifted his gaze from the vent to the door, his pupils contracting. He assessed the threat level instantly. 2 targets entering. Target 1, Shota Aizawa. Quirk, Erasure. Threat high, neutralization capability. Condition, injured prosthetic leg eye patch. Target 2, Toshinori Yagi. Quirk, null. Threat, low physical. Emotional value, critical. Midoriya, Aizawa said. Aizawa walked with a cane now, a heavy limp in his gait. He pulled a metal chair from the corner of the room, turned it around, and sat straddling it, resting his arms on the backrest. All Might stood by the door, closing it softly. The former symbol of peace looked as though he were entering a tomb. Sensei, Izuku replied. His voice was a flat line. It lacked the nervous stutter, the eager cadence of the boy who used to sit in seat number 18. It sounded like gravel grinding against steel. We need to talk about the last 12 months, Aizawa said, opening a file on his lap. And we need to talk about why you tried to escape the infirmary 2 days ago. I didn't try to escape, Izuku corrected calmly. I attempted a tactical relocation. All Might flinched. Young Midoriya, you attacked the medical staff. I neutralized obstacles preventing my movement, Izuku said, looking at All Might without really seeing him. He was looking through him, checking the hallway behind the glass observation pane. The facility is not secure. My presence here is a beacon. The quirks inside One for All resonate with All for One. He knows I am here. By keeping me, you are inviting a siege. Yui has the barrier, Aizawa said. It's the most advanced defense system in the world. Barriers break, Izuku said. I broke 3 of his safe houses last month. Reinforced titanium. Quirk-enhanced concrete. It doesn't matter. If he wants in, he gets in. The only defense is mobility. If I keep moving, he can't corner me. If I keep moving, the collateral damage is minimized. Aizawa narrowed his eyes. You're talking about yourself like you're a payload, not a person. I am the vessel, Izuku said. It wasn't a lament. It was a statement of fact. The vessel must remain intact and mobile until the target can be eliminated. The room fell silent. The hum of the suppressors seemed to grow louder. Aizawa sighed, rubbing his temples. He had interrogated villains, vigilantes, and traitors. He had never interrogated a student who looked at him with the 1,000-yard stare of a war veteran. We have your notebook, Aizawa said, changing tactics. The one Bakugo found. For the first time, Izuku's mask cracked. His fingers curled into the fabric of his hospital pants. That is, classified data. It's a journal of a descent into madness, Aizawa said bluntly. You charted the underground networks of the Paranormal Liberation Front. You hunted down AFO's supply lines. You took out 6 manufacturing plants for the quirk erasing bullets. 7, Izuku corrected. There was 1 in the sewers beneath Saitama. You did all that alone, All Might whispered. Why? Why didn't you trust us? Izuku looked at his hands. They were scarred, rough, the skin calloused from gripping rebar and concrete. Trust is a liability, Izuku said softly. I saw what happened to Gran Torino. I saw what happened to Kaken during the war. I saw you, All Might. He looked up, his eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. If you are near me, you get hurt. The quirk wants to be whole. It pulls destruction toward it. To be alone is to be safe. To be alone is to keep you safe. That logic is flawed, Aizawa said. You were dying out there, Midoriya. The medical report says you haven't had a REM cycle in weeks. You're hallucinating. You're malnourished. A dead vessel is of no use to anyone. I wouldn't have died, Izuku said. I had more to give. How much? Aizawa snapped. How much more of your soul were you going to carve out? Izuku didn't answer. He just looked back at the vent. 1, 2, 3. Click. We are keeping you here, Aizawa said, standing up. The sound of the chair scraping the floor was harsh. You are under house arrest within the Class 2A dormitory annex. You will attend counseling. You will eat 3 meals a day. And you will not leave the campus perimeter. He will come, Izuku warned. Let him, Aizawa said, his eyes flashing red for a brief second. We'll be ready. You aren't the only one who has been training, Midoriya. Aizawa limped toward the door. All Might lingered, his hand reaching out as if to pat Izuku's head, but he stopped inches away. He saw the way Izuku's muscles coiled, ready to strike or flee. He pulled his hand back. I'll bring you some dinner, All Might said weakly. Nutrient paste is fine, Izuku said. It's faster. The door closed. The lock engaged. Izuku let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He closed his eyes. Sector clear, the voice of the third user whispered. But for how long? The first wave. The following afternoon, the isolation protocols were downgraded. He wasn't allowed to leave the room, but approved personnel were allowed to enter. Izuku stood by the window. It was reinforced with layers of polycarbonate and quirk-resistant layering. Outside, the campus of Yui looked deceptively peaceful. He saw students walking between buildings. He saw ectoplasm running drills on the grounds. It looked like a diorama. A fake world. He couldn't remember what it felt like to walk on that grass without scanning the tree line for snipers. The door chimed. Enter, Izuku said automatically. The door opened. Shoto Todoroki and Tenya Ida stepped inside. They were wearing their school uniforms. The gray blazers were pressed, the ties straight. They looked vibrant, colorful against the sterile white of the room. Izuku felt a pang in his chest, a dull ache that wasn't from an injury. It was the ache of distance. He felt like he was looking at them from the bottom of a deep well. Midoriya, Ida said. His voice was loud, booming, trying to force normalcy into the room. He bowed deeply, a perfect 90-degree angle. It is good to see you awake. Todoroki didn't bow. He just stared, his heterochromatic eyes taking in every detail of Izuku's appearance. Izuku was wearing a plain gray t-shirt and sweatpants provided by the school. The clothes hung loosely on his frame. The scars on his arms were visible. Hello, Ida-kun. Todoroki-kun, Izuku said. He didn't bow back. He stood with his back to the wall, keeping the window in his peripheral vision. We brought you something, Ida said, straightening up. He held out a thermos. Lunch rush made beef stew. It is rich in iron and protein. Recovery girl said you needed rebuilding. Ida stepped forward to hand it over. Izuku flinched. It was a small movement, a sharp intake of breath, a shift of weight to his back foot, his hands coming up to guard his face. Ida froze. The thermos shook in his hand. The pain on Ida's face was immediate and devastating. He realized that his friend, the boy he had sworn to protect, had just reacted to him as if he were a villain. I apologize, Ida stammered, stepping back. I moved too quickly. No, Izuku said, lowering his hands slowly. He forced his muscles to relax, one by one. Friend. Ally. Not hostile. No, I'm sorry. Reflexes. The sensors are sensitive. You look like hell, Todoroki said quietly. Ida looked shocked at the bluntness, but Izuku actually relaxed slightly. Bluntness he could handle. Bluntness was efficient. I've been better, Izuku admitted. Todoroki walked over to the bed and sat down. He didn't look at Izuku. He looked at the floor. The old man. Endeavor. He's been looking for you too. He and the top 3. They couldn't keep up with you. They were too slow, Izuku said. They move in convoys. They have protocols. I couldn't wait for permission to engage. You left us behind, Todoroki said. There was no anger in his voice, just a quiet sadness. We were ready to fight with you. You didn't have to be the solitary hero. It's not about being a hero, Izuku said. It's about the blast radius. One for all is a magnet. If I stayed. He looked at Ida, then at Todoroki. Staying. Muscular. Lady Nagant. They all came for me. If I had been in the dorms, if I had been eating dinner with you. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. We aren't glass, Midoriya, Todoroki said, looking up. We don't break that easily. Everything breaks, Izuku whispered. If you've hit it hard enough. Ida placed the thermos on the small table. We are going to prove you wrong, he said firmly, though his eyes were wet behind his glasses. Class A does not leave a comrade behind. You may have walked away, but we have been running after you. And we have caught up. Izuku looked at the thermos. He analyzed it. Stainless steel. Screw top. Potential projectile if necessary. Thank you for the stew, Izuku said. It was a dismissal. Ida and Todoroki exchanged a look. They realized they weren't talking to their classmate. They were talking to a stranger who happened to share his face. Rest, Midoriya, Ida said. They left. As soon as the door closed, Izuku moved to the table. He opened the thermos. The smell of beef and savory broth filled the room. It smelled like home. It smelled like safety. Izuku's stomach cramped violently. He capped the thermos and pushed it away. He couldn't eat it. He couldn't allow himself to feel comfortable. Comfort made you slow. Comfort made you miss the knife in the dark. He went back to counting the fan blades. The girl who floats. It was evening when the door opened again. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody streaks of orange and red across the white floor. Ochako Uraraka stood in the doorway. She wasn't wearing her uniform. She was wearing a casual pink sweater and jeans. Her hair was bobbed, framing a face that had lost some of its roundness. Her eyes were harder than he remembered, but they were still warm. She didn't carry food. She didn't carry a file. She carried nothing. "Hey, Deku-kun," she said softly. Izuku felt something in his chest twist. Deku. She was the one who gave that name meaning. She turned it from an insult into a battle cry. But now the name felt like a curse. Deku was the vigilante. Deku was the monster the civilians ran from in the rain. "Uraraka-san," he acknowledged. She walked in and closed the door. She didn't sit in the chair Aizawa had used. She didn't sit on the bed like Todoroki. She walked right up to him. He was standing by the window again. He tensed as she entered his personal space. Range, close quarters. Threat 0. Action, hold position. She stopped 2 feet away. She looked up at him. She looked at the scar that cut through his eyebrow. She looked at the gauntness of his cheeks. "You're tall," she said. A strange thing to say. I grew a bit," Izuku mumbled. "You didn't call," she said. Her voice wavered. "Not once. I couldn't." "You could have," she countered. "You chose not to. You decided that we weren't strong enough to handle the truth." "It wasn't about strength," Izuku said, his voice straining. "It was about protection." "I know," she interrupted. She took a step closer. "But you know what hurt the most? It wasn't the fear. It wasn't the villains. It was the silence. It was looking at your empty desk every day and wondering if you were cold. Wondering if you were hungry." She reached out. Izuku's instinct screamed. "Contact imminent. Evade." He took a sharp step back, his back hitting the window glass with a thud. "Don't." Uraraka froze, her hands suspended in the air. "Don't what?" "Don't touch you? I'm filthy," Izuku said. He looked at his hands, seeing blood that wasn't there. "I'm covered in it. The dust. The grime. The blood of people I couldn't save. If you touch me, it stains." "I'm not afraid of a little dirt, Deku-kun," she said fiercely. "You should be." Izuku snapped. The sudden volume made her jump. "You don't know what I've become. I'm not the Deku who goes to the mall. I'm not the Deku who studies in the common room. I have looked into the abyss, Uraraka." And it looked back. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving. The danger sense buzzed in his skull, a low, throbbing headache warning him of his own emotional instability. "I am a weapon," he hissed. "You don't hug a loaded gun." Uraraka stared at him. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over her cheeks. But she didn't back down. She didn't run. "You're not a gun," she whispered. "You're Izuku. You're the boy who saves everyone." "Izuku's gone," he said coldly. "He died in the Jaka hospital ruins." Uraraka's face crumbled. She looked at him with such profound pity that it felt like a physical blow. "Then I'll find him," she said. "I'll keep looking until I find him again." She turned around. She couldn't look at him anymore. The rejection, the wall he had built, was too high to climb in one night. "Get some sleep, Deku-kun," she said, her voice thick with tears. "Please. Just sleep." She left. Izuku stood alone in the darkening room. The silence rushed back in, deafening. "Izuku is gone," he repeated the words in his head. They felt true. They felt safer. Izuku felt pain. Izuku felt loneliness. The ninth user, the vigilante, felt nothing. He just executed the mission. But as he looked at the spot where she had stood, he felt a tear track through the grime on his cheek. "If I'm gone," he thought, "then who is crying?" The breach, midnight, the witching hour. The time when the shadows stretched and warped. Izuku lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. He hadn't slept. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the Hyans. He saw Lady Nagant falling. He saw the crumbling city. Buzz, the danger sense pinged. Sharp. Immediate. Izuku sat up, his heart hammering. "Where?" He scanned the room. Nothing. Buzz. 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 It was getting louder. It wasn't a specific direction. It was ambient. Malice. Approaching malice. "He's here." Logic told him it was impossible. The barrier alarms hadn't triggered. No sirens. No shouting, but logic had failed him before. Instinct had kept him alive. He's in the school. He's found the room. No, Izuku whispered. He scrambled off the bed. Not here. Not where they sleep. He had to draw him away. He had to be the rabbit. He ran to the door. Locked. He grabbed the handle and pulled, activating one for all at 5%. The metal groaned, but the heavy magnetic locks held fast. Reinforced. Designed to keep Hulks in. The window. He spun around. The window looked out over the backgrounds, towards the forest. If he could get out, get into the trees, he could lead Shigaraki away from the dorms. He rushed to the window. He placed his hands on the glass. Smash. One for all. 20%. He didn't punch it. He pressed against it, applying sudden, violent pressure. Crack. The reinforced polycarbonate spiderweb. The alarm finally blared, a piercing, red light that flooded the room. Warning. Breach in Sector 4. Containment compromised. I have to go, Izuku muttered, his eyes wide and frantic. I have to go. I have to go. He punched the glass this time. Shards exploded outward, raining down onto the grass 3 stories below. The cold night air rushed in. Izuku climbed onto the ledge. He looked down. It was a 30-foot drop. Easy. He had jumped from skyscrapers. Float, he commanded. He stepped off the ledge. He expected the weightlessness. He expected the anti-gravity sensation of Nana Shimura's quirk to catch him, to lift him into the sky so he could fly away from his friends, drawing the darkness with him. But nothing happened. His core was empty. The exhaustion, the bone-deep, marrow-sucking exhaustion, finally collected its debt. The quirk sputtered. A spark of green, a wisp of smoke, and then, nothing. Oh, Izuku said. Gravity took hold. He fell. He didn't land like a hero. He didn't land in a crouch. He hit the ground with a sickening, heavy thud. His legs, already weakened by atrophy and stress fractures, buckled. He tumbled across the grass, his shoulder slamming into the earth. Pain exploded in his body. White-hot agony. He lay in the wet grass, gasping for air. The alarm was blaring above him. Get up, the second user roared in his head. Move, I can't. Izuku wheezed. He tried to push himself up. His arms shook violently. He managed to lift his chest 3 inches off the ground before collapsing again. He dragged himself. Finger by finger. Digging into the dirt. Crawling. Must draw him away. Midoriya! A voice from above. A scarf wrapped around his waist. Not black whip. Cloth. Carbon fiber. He was lifted, but not by flight. He was pulled back. Aizawa landed next to him. He didn't look angry. He looked terrified. Stop! Aizawa shouted, kneeling beside him, his hands hovering over the boy. Stop moving! You'll tear your stitches! He's coming! Izuku choked out, spitting grass and bile. Sensei, let me go! He's coming! Aizawa looked around. The campus was empty. The sensors were clear. There was no villain. There was no Shigaraki. There is no one here, Midoriya, Aizawa said, his voice breaking. It's just us. It's just you. The danger sense. Izuku sobbed, clutching his head. It won't stop buzzing. Aizawa realized then. It wasn't an external threat. The danger sense was reacting to Izuku himself. His own body, his own mind, was so broken, so volatile, that the quirk perceived him as the threat. He was caught in a feedback loop of his own self-destruction. Erasure, Aizawa whispered. His eyes glowed red. The buzzing in Izuku's head stopped. The lightning died. The strength vanished completely. Izuku slumped into the grass, shivering uncontrollably. The hallucinations faded. The malice receded. He was just a boy lying in the dirt. I can't do it anymore, Izuku whispered, his voice barely audible over the wind. I can't keep running. Then stop, Aizawa said, gathering the boy into his arms. He ignored the pain in his own prosthetic leg as he lifted his student. You don't have to run anymore. We caught you. Lights flickered on in the dorms nearby. Windows opened. Midoriya? Shouted Kirishima's voice. Is that Midoriya? Get back inside! Aizawa roared at the dorms, his voice carrying the authority of a pro-hero. Nobody comes out. He looked down at Izuku. The boy had passed out from the pain, his head lolling against Aizawa's shoulder. Aizawa began the slow walk back to the infirmary. He realized now that the interrogation was useless. The restraints were useless. They weren't dealing with a soldier who needed to be debriefed. They were dealing with a ghost who didn't know he was allowed to be alive, and bringing him back to life was going to be the hardest fight Class 1A had ever faced. The walk from the main academic building to the Heights Alliance dormitories was a path Izuku Midoriya had walked 1,000 times. He knew the number of pavement stones, 412. He knew the exact angle of the sun at 5 p.m. during the autumn equinox. He knew the smell of the cherry blossom trees in spring and the scent of wet asphalt in the summer rain. But today, the path felt alien. It wasn't the ground that had changed. It was the way he walked upon it. A year ago, he would have walked this path chatting with Uraraka or Ida, his hands gesturing wildly as he muttered about hero theory. Now, he walked in the center of a triangular formation. All Might was on his left flank. Aizawa was on his right. Izuku walked silently. His footsteps made no sound. He had learned to distribute his weight to silence his movement, a survival necessity in the crumbling ruins of the cities where sound meant death. He scanned the perimeter constantly. Rooftop clear. Shrubbery, dense, potential ambush point. Windows, reflected sunlight, low visibility into the rooms. Midoriya, Aizawa's voice cut through his tactical analysis. Izuku stopped instantly, his body tensing. Target? No target, Aizawa sighed, the exhaustion evident in his voice. We are just moving you to the dorms. Relax your shoulders. You look like you're about to snap a tendon. Izuku tried to comply. He forced his trapezius muscles to lower. He unclenched his jaw. But the buzzing in the back of his skull, the danger sense, was a low-level static. It wasn't screaming, but it was humming. It knew he was walking into a trap, not a villain trap. A social one. The class has been briefed, All Might said gently, placing a hand on Izuku's shoulder. Izuku flinched but didn't pull away. They know you are fragile right now. They promised to give you space. They won't, Izuku whispered. They're Class A. They don't know what space means. Perhaps, All Might admitted with a sad smile. But they are also your friends. They miss you. Friends. The word tasted like ash. Friends were liabilities. Friends were hostages. Friends were the people Shigaraki would rot into dust just to see the look on Izuku's face. They reached the front door of the Heights Alliance. The massive glass doors reflected Izuku's image back at him. He saw the scars. The gray streak in his hair. The clothes that hung off his skeletal frame. He didn't look like a student. He looked like a ghost that had forgotten to fade away. Go on, Aizawa said, swiping his ID card. The lock beeped green. They're waiting. Izuku took a breath. It rattled in his chest. He stepped inside. The common room. The atmosphere inside the Heights Alliance common room was pressurized. It felt less like a student lounge and more like a bomb disposal unit waiting for the timer to hit 0. The decorations were modest. Momo Janyorozu had created a banner that simply said "Welcome back," but at the last minute, fearing it was too loud, she had taken it down. Now, the room was clean, warm, and smelled incredibly, painfully good. Katsuki Bakugo was in the kitchen. He was not yelling. He was not ordering the extras around. He was chopping green onions with surgical precision. Chop. 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 The rhythm was the only steady sound in the room. On the stove, a massive pot of curry was simmering. Next to it, a pan of oil was heating up for tonkatsu. Bakugo, Kirishima whispered, leaning over the counter. You've been cooking for 3 hours. Is it, okay? Bakugo didn't look up. It's fine. You're not yelling, Kirishima noted nervously. It's weirding everyone out, man. Usually, you'd be screaming about how we chopped the carrots wrong. Bakugo paused. The knife hovered over the cutting board. Shut up, shitty hair, he said. But there was no heat in it. It was quiet. Flat. Bakugo resumed chopping. He couldn't yell. If he yelled, he might start screaming, and if he started screaming, He might not stop. He had seen Deku in the crater. He had felt the bones through the suit. He had read the medical report Aizawa had left on the table, the list of injuries so long it looked like a receipt from a grocery store. Collapsed lung. 40% hearing loss in the right ear, healed. Stress fractures in femurs. Severe malnutrition. Bakugo flipped the pork cutlet into the oil. It hissed. He was angry. God, he was so angry. But not at Deku. Not anymore. He was angry at the silence. The silence of the last year. The silence of the empty desk. And now, the silence of the boy who used to mutter so much it drove Bakugo crazy. He's here, Jiro said, her ear jacks twitching. I hear footsteps. 3 sets. One is, really light. The room froze. Siro turned off the TV. Ashido stopped fidgeting. Uraraka stood up from the sofa, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. Todoroki stood by the window, his expression unreadable. The front door opened. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Izuku Midoriya stepped into the entryway. He took off his shoes. He placed them neatly, perfectly aligned, parallel to the edge of the Genkan. He stepped up into the common room. He kept his head down. His shoulders were hunched. He held his left arm across his chest, a protective posture protecting his vital organs. Welcome back, Midoriya. Ida boomed. It was too loud. Izuku's head snapped up. His eyes were wide, the pupils blown. He took a sharp step back, his heel hitting the doorframe. His hand went to his hip, reaching for a support item that wasn't there. Sorry. Ida immediately lowered his voice, looking horrified. I apologize. My volume control. It's okay, Izuku whispered. He scanned the room. 18 pairs of eyes were locked on him. He felt the weight of their gaze. It felt like the pressure of a collapsing building. Too many variables. Too many blind spots. Exits. Front door blocked by Aizawa, kitchen door, obstructed by counter, patio doors, glass breakable. Hey, Midoriya, Kirishima said, stepping forward with a gentle smile. Good to see you, man. Really? Kirishima raised a hand for a high five or a fist bump. Izuku stared at the hand. In the underground, a raised hand meant a quirk activation. It meant a shockwave, a blade, a decay wave. Izuku flinched violently, ducking to the left, his body dropping into a combat crouch. Green lightning sparked around his legs for a microsecond before the suppressors on his wrists whined, dampening the power. Kirishima froze, his hands still in the air. Whoa! I wasn't. Reflex, Izuku gasped, standing up quickly, looking ashamed. Reflex. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Don't apologize, Uraraka said softly. She walked toward him, but she stopped 10 feet away, remembering the hospital room. We made dinner. Katsudon. And curry. It's your favorite. Izuku looked toward the kitchen. He saw Bakugo. Bakugo was standing by the stove, his back to the room. He wasn't looking at Izuku. He was staring at the boiling oil. Kaken, Izuku breathed. Bakugo didn't turn around. His shoulders were rigid. Sit down, Bakugo said. His voice was low, barely carrying across the room. Food's ready. The class scrambled to make space at the large communal table. They pulled out a chair for Izuku, the one in the middle, surrounded by everyone. Izuku looked at the chair. Surrounded. No escape route. If an attack comes from the ceiling, I'm pinned. Can I? Izuku pointed to the small table in the corner, usually used for stacking magazines. Can I sit there? A heavy silence fell over the room. Midoriya, we moved the tables together so we could, Ashido started. Let him sit where he wants, Todoroki interrupted. Izuku scurried to the corner table. He sat with his back to the wall, facing the room. He needed to see the entrances. The class awkwardly took their seats. The clatter of plates and silverware began. It was forced. Usually, dinner at Heights Alliance was a cacophony of laughter, arguments, and stealing food. Tonight, it was like a funeral wake. Bakugo plated the food. He walked over to Izuku's corner table. He slammed the bowl of katsudon down. Clack. The sound was sharp, but not aggressive. Eat, Bakugo said. He didn't make eye contact. He walked away, taking his own bowl to the main table, sitting as far from Izuku as possible. Izuku looked at the bowl. The steam rose, carrying the scent of dashi, onions, and fried pork. It was the smell of his childhood. It was the smell of his mother's kitchen. His stomach cramped. His body, conditioned to nutrient paste and stale energy bars, revolted at the richness of the smell. He picked up the chopsticks. His hand was shaking. The tremors were getting worse. Eat. Maintain caloric intake. Refuel for the next engagement. He took a bite. The flavor exploded in his mouth. It was perfect. It was warm, and it made him want to vomit. It was too normal. How could he eat katsudon when the world was burning? How could he sit here in the air conditioning when he knew there were no mood gestating in vats somewhere in the dark? You don't deserve this, the voice in his head whispered. You left them. You hurt them. You are a plague. A loud crash echoed through the room. Sato had laughed at a joke from Siro and accidentally knocked a glass pitcher of water off the table. Smash! The sound of shattering glass was identical to the sound of a containment vat breaking. Izuku didn't think. Get down! He launched himself from the chair. He didn't use one for all, the suppressors held it back. But his raw physical speed was terrifying. He cleared the distance to the main table in a blur. He tackled Sato, slamming the larger boy to the ground, shielding him with his own body. Contact! Sniper! 9 o'clock! Izuku screamed, his voice raw and unrecognizable. He looked around wildly, eyes darting, searching for the threat. His hand was gripping Sato's collar so tight the fabric tore. The room was dead silent. Sato was lying on the floor, eyes wide with terror, looking up at Izuku. Midoriya, it was just water. Izuku blinked. The red haze in his vision cleared. He saw the shattered glass. He saw the water spreading on the floor. He saw the faces of his classmates. Mina was covering her mouth. Kaminari looked like he was about to cry. Uraraka was pale as a sheet. They were looking at him like he was a monster. No. Not a monster. They were looking at him like he was broken. Izuku scrambled off Sato. He backed away, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He tripped over a chair and fell hard onto his rear. Izuku choked. I thought. He looked at his hands. They were shaking so hard he couldn't make a fist. I can't be here, he whispered. I can't be here. He scrambled to his feet and ran. He didn't run to the elevator. He ran to the stairs, taking them 3 at a time. He needed to be high up. He needed isolation. The sound of his door slamming shut on the 2nd floor echoed through the silent common room. The boiling point. Downstairs, nobody moved. Is he? Kaminari whispered. Is he insane? Don't use that word, Ajui snapped, though her voice wavered. He attacked Sato, Mineta said, trembling under the table. Did you see his eyes? He looked like he was going to kill something. He was protecting him, Todoroki said quietly. He covered Sato's body with his own. He thought we were under attack. Uraraka sank into her chair, putting her head on the table. We did it wrong. We overwhelmed him. Aizawa-sensei said we had to be careful, and we threw a party. We were just trying to be nice. Hagakure sobbed. Nice isn't what he needs. The voice cut through the room like a blade. Katsuki Bakugo stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. He hadn't eaten a bite of his food. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. He was vibrating, not with explosions, but with a tension that was far more dangerous. Bakugo? Kirishima asked cautiously. Bakugo didn't answer. He walked to the stove. He turned off the burner that was still keeping the curry warm. Click. The silence that followed was heavy. Bakugo walked to the stairs. Where are you going? Ida asked, standing up to block him. Bakugo, leave him alone. He is in a fragile state. Confrontation will only exacerbate the move. 4 eyes, Bakugo said. He didn't yell. He didn't snarl. He spoke with a deadly, quiet calm. I'm not going to fight him, Bakugo said. I'm going to do what you extras are too scared to do. And what is that? Todoroki asked, standing up as well. I'm going to tell him the truth. Bakugo stepped around Ida. He walked up the stairs. His footsteps were heavy, deliberate. Thump. 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 The class watched him go, too afraid to stop him. The ghost in room 2 to 18. Izuku's room was dark. He hadn't turned on the lights. He sat on the floor, pressed into the corner between his bed and the wall. He had pulled his knees to his chest, wrapping his arms around his legs. The room hadn't changed in a year. His All Might posters were still on the wall. His dumbbells were in the corner. His desk was cluttered with old homework assignments that were now irrelevant. It was a museum of a boy who didn't exist anymore. Izuku was hyperventilating. He tried to use the breathing techniques Endeavor had taught him. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. It wasn't working. The image of Sato's terrified face was burned into his retinas. I scared them. I hurt them. I am the danger. He looked at his backpack, the tattered yellow bag he had carried through the mud and blood. It was sitting on the floor where he had dropped it. He crawled over to it. He unzipped it with shaking hands. He pulled out a notebook. It wasn't one of his hero analysis for the future journals. The cover was burnt. The pages were waterlogged and crinkled. It had no title. He opened it to the last page. He needed to read the plan. He needed to know that if he lost control, if Shigaraki tried to take over his body right here in the dorms, there was a way out. Entry 402. Weak points of the dormitory structure. Gas main runs under the north wall. If compromised, structural integrity fails in 12 seconds. Self-destruction protocol. If AFO consciousness exceeds 80%, target gas main with Manchester smash. He traced the words with his dirty finger. It was a comfort. A dark, twisted comfort. Bam! The door to his room didn't open. It flew open. The lock shattered. The wood splintered. The door swung inward and slammed against the wall, bouncing back. Katsuki Bakugo stood in the doorway. The hallway light silhouetted him. He looked like a demon. He looked like judgment. Izuku scrambled back, clutching the notebook to his chest. Keikaken? You kicked the door. I knocked, Bakugo lied. He walked into the room. He didn't turn on the lights. He kicked the door shut behind him. It jammed in the frame, crooked. Go away, Izuku whispered. Please. I'm dangerous. You're not dangerous, Bakugo said. He walked closer. You're pathetic. Izuku flinched. The insult was familiar. It was grounding in a sick way. It was the old Kaken. You're right, Izuku said. I am. So leave. Why did you run? Bakugo asked. He stopped in the middle of the room. We made food. You ate one bite and ran away like a coward. I almost killed Sato. Izuku's voice pitched up, cracking. I heard a noise and I reacted. I can't turn it off, Kaken. The war, it doesn't stop. It's in my head. So what? Bakugo said. Izuku blinked. What? So you have PTSD. So you're messed up, Bakugo said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Did you think you were special? Did you think you were the only one? Bakugo took a step forward. You think I sleep? Bakugo asked softly. You think I don't hear you screaming when I close my eyes? You think Round Face doesn't wake up floating because she had a nightmare about falling? It's not the same, Izuku argued, tears streaming down his face. I'm the target. AFO wants me. If I'm here, you all die. We're heroes, you idiot. Bakugo shouted, finally breaking his silence. The volume shook the walls. Dying is part of the job description. Stop trying to hog all the risk. Bakugo loomed over him. He looked down at the boy on the floor. Why didn't you trust me? Bakugo asked. His voice dropped again, cracking this time. Why did you leave a note? A damned letter, Deku? You think a piece of paper makes up for a year of silence? I had to protect you, Izuku sobbed. Protect me? Bakugo laughed, a harsh, barking sound. You think you're stronger than me? You think I need your protection? Yes. Izuku yelled, looking up. Because you're important. Because if you get hurt because of me, I can't. I can't live with that. And you think I can live with this? Bakugo gestured at Izuku's emaciated state. You think watching you kill yourself slowly is protecting me? Bakugo's eyes fell on the notebook in Izuku's hands. What is that? Bakugo asked. Izuku froze. He clutched the book tighter. Nothing. Give it to me. No. Give. It. Too. Me. Bakugo didn't wait. He lunged. Izuku tried to dodge, but he was sitting down, and he was weak. Bakugo was fresh. Bakugo grabbed the notebook. No! Kaken, don't read it! Izuku pleaded, reaching for it. Bakugo shoved him back with one hand. He opened the book. He held it up to the sliver of light coming from the window. He read the page. Self-destruction protocol. Gas main. Manchester smash. The silence that filled the room was suffocating. It was colder than the winter air outside. Bakugo read it again. He needed to be sure. He needed to be sure that his childhood friend, his rival, the person he had spent his life chasing, had written a detailed plan on how to blow himself up to save everyone else. Bakugo lowered the book. His hand was shaking. Sparks were popping off his palms, singing the edges of the paper. This? Bakugo whispered. This isn't hero analysis. Izuku curled into a ball, hiding his face in his knees. Give it back. You were planning to die, Bakugo said. He sounded horrified. Not angry. Horrified. You weren't fighting to win. You were fighting to die on your own terms. It's the only way to be sure, Izuku mumbled into his knees. If he takes me, if he gets one for all. Shut up, Bakugo threw the notebook. It hit the wall with a loud thud and slid to the floor. He grabbed Izuku by the collar of his shirt and hauled him up. He slammed him against the wall. You listen to me, you suicidal moron, Bakugo hissed, his face inches from Izuku's. Tears were prickling the corners of Bakugo's eyes. You don't get to decide that. You don't get to decide when you check out. There's no other way. Izuku cried. We are the other way. Bakugo shook him. Class A. The teachers. Me. We are the contingency plan. If you lose control, we stop you. We don't kill you. We save you. You can't. Watch me. Bakugo snarled. I will become the #1 hero, and I can't do that if my greatest rival blows himself up in a ditch. You have to live, Deku. You have to live so I can beat you properly. Izuku stared at him. He saw the fire in Bakugo's eyes. It wasn't hatred. It was a desperate, burning need to keep Izuku alive. Bakugo released him. Izuku slid down the wall, but he didn't curl up this time. He just sat there, looking at Bakugo. Bakugo wiped his eyes roughly with his arm. He walked over to the notebook. He picked it up. I'm keeping this, Bakugo said. Kaken. No, Bakugo cut him off. I'm keeping it. And I'm going to burn it. And then you're going to write a new one. A new one? Yeah, Bakugo said, walking to the door. He paused, his hand on the frame. A notebook on how we kick AFO's ass. Together. He looked back at Izuku. The shadows covered Bakugo's eyes, but his mouth was set in a grim line. Wash your face, Bakugo said. I'll reheat the Katsudan. If you don't come down in 10 minutes, I'm dragging you down. Bakugo walked out. The door hung crookedly on its hinges. Izuku sat alone in the dark. He looked at his empty hands. The notebook was gone. The plan to die was gone. He felt terrified. Without the plan, he had no safety net. But then he remembered Bakugo's face. He remembered the shaking in Bakugo's hands. We are the contingency plan. Izuku took a breath. It was shaky, but it was deep. He stood up. His legs trembled, but they held. He walked to the bathroom attached to his room. He turned on the tap. He splashed cold water on his face, washing away the sweat and the tears. He looked in the mirror. The ghost stared back. But behind the ghost, he saw the faint outline of a boy who wanted to eat katsudon with his friends. Izuku dried his face. He walked to the door. He stepped past the broken lock. He headed downstairs. The silence was over.